Welcome. We're talking today about KubeCon, the virtual event that was held last week with our NetApp A team members. We have Michael Cade, Ruairi McBride, and Jason Benedicic. Without further ado, I'm going to send it over to Rory to chat a little bit about what we've seen, what were our big takeaways, and what you got out of the conference.
Thank you, Cecelia. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Monday after the conference. Hopefully everything's still fresh in your mind from what we've got on. First impressions, what do people think? Michael, do you want to take this first of all?
Well, yeah, it's not the first virtual event that we've had to deal with in 2020. So I think we all kind of knew what was kind of coming. I thought it was like the platform itself was relatively good. I think content was okay. It was my first. I'll put a clarification out here. This is my first open source type event. There was a load of sessions there. I thought it was seeing the numbers after the fact. So on Friday they sent out a load of the numbers. So 7,300 virtual attendees, and I don't remember anything crashing or anything being a problem. I thought it was pretty stable, which is pretty good. They actually used the same app or the platform that we use for VMon, and again that was pretty solid as well throughout that session or that conference. The UI, decent experience. I thought that was good, easy to navigate. I think the one thing that the good takeaway that I'll probably take back to our guys is around offloading everything out of the platform from a chat perspective, from a QA out to Slack.
Yep.
Which, okay, at the time, that was very noisy, and I think a lot of people made comments around social media around that. But think about that from an end game, and that's pretty much 7,300 odd people, and plus others that didn't even attend the conference, are now in this new community chat function, and that's got some powerful. That'll be pretty powerful moving forward, I think.
That lasts after last week. That carries on now for the foreseeable. I mean, you mentioned a few things there I think I'd like to touch on. It was also my first KubeCon. I probably wouldn't have attended the physical event. Probably wouldn't have been able to get the time away, but because it was virtual, I was able to fit that in, which I was pleased with. Again, I think that segregation between the Q&A and the chat feature and the actual content was great. It meant then it's going to carry over. And I've seen as well that the platform's going to have all the presentations on there until the 13th of November, which is good. So you can get on-demand access until then.
Yeah, they said about everything's going to be on YouTube as well, like they've done in years gone by.
Yeah.
So all of the sessions will be available there as well, which is pretty good. Every vendor should be doing things like that. It's just how we consume. I can't get to it. We all can't get to every session, especially in virtual world. But also when we get back to in-person events, those vendors that enable you to view their content after the fact, I think that's really important. Big nods to AWS's and Azure, Microsoft. They all do a really good job when it comes to sharing that content out.
Indeed. So, Jason, over to you. What were your impressions of the event?
So, I think largely some similar responses. I think migrating the chat out was nice, if not a little overwhelming. There were probably into the hundreds of channels. I'm not even sure. There was a lot of scrolling to find the right channels. But it was good to drop in. And one of the things I think was quite interesting is that each of the different vendors sponsors got a channel. Which that's, I guess, something that everybody needed to overcome, because conferences run on sponsorship, really. Let's be honest, there's a lot of money involved in physical conferences and going to conferences. And open source conferences must come with an even higher restriction on how budgets work. And, you know, a lot of this is open source and free, and, you know, there's not a huge amount of money coming into some of these organizations. So putting on a huge conference can be a huge burden for them. So I think that giving each of the sponsors an area they could speak to the attendees and all those sorts of things is actually a really nice way of handling that, what would have been scanning the badges at the booth behavior before. So I think that's a really big win, and I think that probably helped them significantly with attracting sponsors. So I think it was more of a technicality than a nice to have for the users. But again, I dropped into a couple of them, and it was nice to speak to people. So that was a useful section. The platform, okay. Again, the content, there's a lot. I think that's one of the things with such a large foundation, and we all know the CNCF landscape is, well, it's very hard to navigate. You know, there's thousands of projects in there, I guess. So there was a huge amount of content. So I'm really glad that we can go back and review some of that again while they're still online, because there are lots of things that I missed that I'd love to go back and see. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity during the physical event. I probably only would have been able to catch half a dozen sessions a day or something. So.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there, I think, a very valid point, the bit about, you know, the face-to-face interaction, especially for vendors that are there. You know, they're meeting maybe their larger customers or their next largest customer, you know, and you've got that VP interaction and so on and so forth at those conferences that I suppose isn't happening in this day and age. So yeah, it's definitely hard, and I think separating that badge scanning out into who actively wants to know more about our product or our services is definitely a huge drive to look to using Slack, I would say, for more virtual conferences. Cool. Well, let's see if there's any takeaways, anything that you learned that you're going to use in the future. I'll carry on with you, Jason, for this one. Anything really stand out that you thought, yep, that's what I've learned and taken away this week?
I have learned a hell of a lot. I'll go through a couple of just points though. So the amount of API changes in Kubernetes, there's a whole section of one of the keynotes on what's been promoted to GA, what's in beta, what's in alpha. I didn't realize there were so many. You know, even as somebody that uses it quite often, there was a lot more in there than I was aware of, and also just how long some of them have been in beta. Having only worked with a project for, you know, a couple of years myself, having them say, you know, oh, this was been in beta since version 1.2, and we're on like 1.19 or something by now. You know, it moves a lot. And then I took away that there was a lot more discussion around state persistence and data. Most of the work I've done up to this point with containers has been stateless. And it seems that now that there's wider adoption, that state has become very important. And there's a large part of the ecosystem talking about that. And there were a lot of vendors talking about that as well. So that's the biggest takeaway for me, I think.
Ooh, good. And Michael, what stood out to you that you thought that's worth noting, that's worth feeding back into my compadres over at Veeam?
So I was going to the physical event, and I'd put it down as an education visit. So those that follow me and those that read my blogs and stuff, is I started off maybe last summer. This was very new to me, this world, this cloud native, the foundation and everything, and really learning, starting off with containerization, doing a bit of CI/CD and understanding what that actually means and why, and what technologies we'd do with it. Work with Jason quite a lot around understanding from an ops point of view or infrastructure point of view into this new world. So this was more about education for me and just understanding it. But obviously there's always going to be a side swipe of understanding what or where data management sits in this world. And I was actually kind of not shocked, but there's not much out there. And I feel like with the increase of stateful applications that are going to land in this space, and the adoption rate of not just the Fortune 200, Fortune 500 adopting this technology, I think there is going to be a requirement more and more around some sort of data management for that Kubernetes, from containerization, stateful applications, etc. So I was interested and kind of found myself diving into more of the application stacks and understanding a little bit more about that, which was not on my learning roadmap, if you like. I wanted to stay up the top with containerization, CI/CD, and very much the, let's call it the ops side of things, rather than getting down into the dev of it and understanding what and how these applications are deployed. If they're going to be stateful, what does the storage mapping look like from that point of view? Then how and why would a dev put any effort into data management? Because they've never done it before. So why do they care now? So having, and this was where, if I was in person, I could quite easily go into a bar. I could go up into the show floor, and you can have those conversations with either vendors who are aligned to the application and the storage vendors there as well. So getting in with NetApp and understanding what their guys are saying around that. But obviously, with it being virtual, I can jump in this noisy Slack channel today and I can try and have a conversation about it, but you're probably not going to get the same reaction, the same feedback that you want to hear. So I think that was the big couple of takeaways that I got. I found myself in sessions that I did not plan on attending, things around databases, which are generally, in my opinion, going to be where the stateful applications reside. So how do we then
persistent data as well?
Yeah, persistent volume. So speaking to or looking into the storage vendors, looking into the application vendors, trying to get the developer track as well, and trying to understand some of the terminology and some of the technology these guys are using. But yeah, that was my big takeaway. I'd love to be able to, if 2021 becomes a physical event thing, then my name will be down to go to it again from a physical event point of view and education.
Good to hear. Yeah, I mean, for myself, being pretty new to the whole environment, I did find it quite inspiring that there's so many different large and small vendors that want to contribute to projects, and I think the passion that people have to see these through. The big thing that I thought was great was in one of the keynotes, I think I'm just looking at my notes here, I think it was a Cheryl Hung mentioned a thing that she's created called the technology radar, which shows you which is an evolving or actually stable product. And I think that's a great idea and a great framework that I might try and start incorporating into some other ideas that we have around technology and services. But yeah, great event from bringing lots of people with different ideas together, and glad to hear that you both got something out of it. So moving on, I wanted to know if you picked up on NetApp's message. Did you swing by their virtual booth? What you thought of it? Did you pick up anything that was of interest whilst there? Who wants to go first?
I'll take it. Go on then.
Good.
So yes, I visited the booth, mostly because I wanted to see what was happening with Astra. I know that.
And what is Project Astra for those that maybe don't know?
Now you put me on the spot. It's I don't entirely know 100%. I'll be honest. So it's an evolution of some of the existing technology. So it's like an evolution of Trident. So NetApp have had Trident for a long time. It does provisioning of persistent volumes and management of that. What Astra does, it takes some of the things that NetApp learned during the time of the NetApp Kubernetes service, and it extends that out into application-aware management of that data and movement of that data. So not only will you be able to provision the persistent volume, you'll be able to provision protection for it and migrations and those sorts of things. So I don't have the full suite of knowledge on it yet. It's still very early days, but that was what I took away from it. But So it was nice to see what was happening. Nice to see that's progressing. I know that the NetApp had planned to do a lot of the announcements at the original physical event. So I'm sure it was pretty hard for the folks that wanted to, be there on the booth and showing those things out to the the attendees, to have to wait this long to get everyone to see it. So that was it was nice. It was some good demos. There's some really good stuff coming along, and I kind of get the feeling that Astra and a few other products in the market are kind of where the enterprises may well start to adopt containers and Kubernetes. I think it's a hard line at the moment of why do I need it? I mean, it's what's the benefit? And there's a lot of additional education, and there's a lot of additional operational overhead moving to containers, especially if you're just a traditional enterprise. So as many of the options there are to take some of that complexity and make it easier for people to understand and implement, I think tools that do that are going to help move that forward. Mostly because I think at some point every enterprise or every business is going to be forced into containers for some reason. It may be that their partners have started providing software in a container and therefore it needs to be orchestrated in ops anyway, or that something they're buying is container based. So it might not be that they've chosen to refactor their own applications. It just might be the software they're purchasing requires orchestration. So
it's a very interesting
anything
point.
that helps them onboard that and operationalize it is going to be a good thing.
Cool. Good. So, Michael, did you get over to the booth at all, or were you busy in various sessions across the few days that we had?
So the one thing that I wanted to get kind of an update on was around Trident and the whole persistent storage, that stateful application, and kind of touching on what Jason's already spoken about, but more of an orchestrated angle is around the Trident piece. And exactly as Jason said, is that it feels like, and I'm very new to it as well, like last summer, but it feels like there's a lot of effort going into that, again, into that stateful application, that persistent volume. How do we do it so fast? It needs to be so simple or simplified of integration from a storage perspective. That's kind of what I took away from it, but from the NetApp booth, and then but also how you kind of, when you start digging even deeper into that CI/CD type approach, is that, and exactly again as Jason said, and this is where there's no joke as to why VMware have gone down that route of adopting Kubernetes inside the same platform that we've been using for virtualization for the last however long. Like having them sit side by side in the same infrastructure is like no joke. They haven't just made.
It's going to make it so much easier for people to consume when the time is right, though, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then you come to the storage vendor, unless like the traditional storage vendor that you might use, the traditional VMFS LUNs or NFS LUNs, and you can then, what you're saying, that I could use this storage that we've already purchased, and we can use that for our container-based solution as well, and we can wrap around this CI/CD pipeline to be able to dynamically provision and have that flexibility of what that storage looks like and how it feels. And what you're saying, that my storage skills still fit into this new world. Well, yeah, they absolutely do. In fact, all we're doing is making them streamlined, and we're going to make your life better and easier if you did want to adopt and go into that cloud native type approach. I think that was the biggest takeaway that like the light bulb moment kind of went off, is that you don't really, like if you're a traditional storage admin that's focused on ONTAP, and you have been for the last 10, 15 years, like us.
Yeah.
And you may be thinking, oh, actually my skills are kind of coming to the end of the line and it's being replaced by automation. And yeah, a lot of that management needs to be. Like, I remember being in 18 meetings 3-4 years ago where we're saying things need to be simplified, and now they are. And it's just a case of taking that and rolling with it and understanding more of the infrastructure, more of the platform that you can consume and do with that storage. And I think you've just got to embrace a lot of this new technology, and some will absolutely not be around, but some is going to stick, and some will enable so much more from a business point of view.
Cool. Good to hear. Good to hear. Well, I think, gentlemen, that's been a very insightful conversation. What I would like to say is, for anybody that maybe wasn't available to meet those European time zones, there is KubeCon virtual for North America between the 17th and 20th of November. No doubt NetApp will be there again, where you can touch base with them. And there will be others that I would suggest that you go see and listen to. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and hand you back over to Cecelia to close down the call.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. I appreciate the time that you took. And for those of you out there listening, we'd love to hear your feedback. So let us know what you think. Until next time, take care.